Okay, this video is about the greatest doctrine ever rejected, I suppose. I don't know of a greater doctrine in the Bible so expressly and succinctly stated and so absolutely asserted. And Mark 12:10, quoting Jesus, stone which opined away, actually the ones who are building, the builders opined away a stone. And Jesus said, this one, that is that stone that was opined away by the builders, has become unto head of corner. Interesting, that word become comes from ginomai, very simple word in the Greek New Testament KOINE text, common, very, very common, quite offensive to scholastics and abstract thinkers, and difficult to produce a lot of abstract constructs from the common text, but it simply refers to become. Another word for be in the KOINE text is what they pronounce it aiming. And I really don't care how they pronounce it, it just means be. So in the KOINE text, Jesus is recorded as having used this word become. Now that's significant when we look over at Psalm 118 where this is quoted. This is the text that's quoted, and more correctly was translated by the Spirit of God. And that translator, the Spirit of God who breathed these words, scripted this text through his inspired writers, those who were moved by the Holy Spirit, selected the word become for the word hayatha, more rather haya. So haya means become. And that's not my opinion, that's not anyone else's. I'm told by very credible sources who traveled to the Middle East that Judaizers in the Middle East still reject haya as become, and I can certainly see why, especially when we get to the greatest doctrine in the Bible. Let's go and look and see what the implications are and why people even today would have a vested interest in rejecting haya as become. Where we are a Christian faith, that is, for 2,000 years, those of us who are part of the revolution, I suppose, that people are now buying into, but it began during the ministry of Christ when he began to call out those who were prepared by John the Baptizer. But here's the greatest doctrine. And it says, in the beginning was, the little word was is in green, that's actually was being, so in the beginning, the Word was always being, so that's eternality, always. So the always beingness of the Word, the Logos, and the Word was always being toward the God, very specific there. So we have the eternal being of the Logos, the eternal being toward the Father, the God, and the Word was always being God. So the eternally always being God, always being toward the God, and always being. All that's established in the first verse. But drop down to John 1:14a. It says, in the Logos, that of which was established, defined, and specifically stated in John 1, the first verse, it says the Logos came to be flesh. Now the implications of this are even more remarkable when we notice that, well, if haya is become, and we were to, let's just quickly, I know I don't have the luxury of the time that people who constantly bombard the text rather than being scripted by it, but let's just quickly get on with a popular, well, a very famous text, I probably should say, and this is an imperfect of haya, and it is usually translated I am, and then this pronoun here is usually translated that, I am that, and then this is repeated again, this is repeated, I am that I am. Well, in light of what Jesus has said, that haya is become, then this says I will become, and that's not debatable, and that's repeated. I will become, This word is who, and it's what, which is fascinating, and this is in Exodus 3:14. Exodus 3. So you can see why people of a Judaic, or that is of a Judaizer tradition and not of the law of Moses, would reject a translation by the Holy Spirit recorded in the New Testament common text. Because if this is become, then what it means in a word, the greatest doctrine specifically stated, is that Jesus is both who and what the God of the Bible became. He became flesh, came to be flesh, so that answers what. And then, of course, in the context of John 1, Jesus is the answer to the question, who. So the greatest doctrine in the Bible is not taught. It's ignored and opined away because, ironically, the text that speaks of the stone, a stone builders opine away, is actually referring to Jesus, who has become the head of the corner. And that quotes Psalm 118:22, which remarkably, and how striking that is, now when you say, well, what did Moses want to know? Anyone know who it was that would be sending him? And the true and living God of the Bible, the only God who is the Creator, he said, I will become who I will become. Jesus answers to that, who and what. Jesus is the one we point to and say he is God in the flesh. He is the one in whom the fullness of the Godhead dwells bodily. So it's remarkable how much this is unfortunately discarded. Ironically, like the stone of which it speaks, this is the text that resolves the seemingly endless narrative being written in all the verbiage constantly, and banter and comments and just constant talk about Exodus 3:14, and then disputes about grammar over genomai and hayah. But genomai is the word for hayah, and another word is for be in KOINE, and no word exists for be in Hebrew. That's supplied whenever that is called for. But this is the most remarkable doctrine. It is the superlative doctrine of all doctrines. And unless we are those who are scripted by Christ, we would join those who would reject the God who came to be flesh. Well, that's enough. It's the greatest doctrine in the world. It doesn't need to be lengthy and verbose, just taught and proclaimed.